I wrote about AI regulation and specifically AI detectors and why they're not, yeah, and why they're not like entirely accurate and other like means should be used when it comes to like education and awareness at large. And then I was disqualified because they flagged it for AI.
Hello, and welcome back to the Voice for You podcast, where we empower the leaders of today and tomorrow. I'm your host, Jeshwant Vana. Today, I'm joined by a young leader in our community. She is an activist and researcher for AI, social responsibility, and justice. She serves as the Indiana Executive Director for ENCODE Justice, leading efforts for AI guidelines and Indiana education policies, having bills passed as part of her role. She has also spearheaded many youth gun violence prevention initiatives as part of the Indianapolis MYLC, collaborating with 15 plus organizations and gaining recognition from the Indiana Pacers and the Indiana Senate. Her work has definitely not gone unnoticed, as she was named a 2025 Coca-Cola Scholar. Making a change in her community in many ways, she is Miss Asha Genawi. How are you doing today, Asha?
Hi, I'm doing quite well. Very excited to be here. Looking forward to this conversation. Thank you so much for having me here today.
I should be thanking you, for hopping on the podcast, here to, have talk and have a conversation and, tell your wisdom and how, your dreams, your passions, and who you are as a person. So thank you so much. Definitely.
Yeah, of course. Always willing.
Yeah. So, like I said, before I get into my interview, tell me a little bit about yourself, your hobbies, your passions, and who you are as a person.
Of course. So I'm currently, I'm going to be an incoming freshman at Columbia University, majoring in computer science and mathematics, maybe a minor in something sociology or public policy related. Still have yet to figure that part out, but I'm hopefully waiting till I go to Columbia, scope out the vibe a little bit more there to see what I do. My main passions are at the intersection of technology and social justice. So in the future, I'm really interested in building technology and specifically AI systems that contribute to a better society and contribute to overall like equity in society and making sure that social justice issues can be solved with technology, because I think a lot of the times people kind of fail to recognize intersectional issues and how to approach them with an intersectional lens. So my main goal is to really bridge the gap between developing technology and these persisting social justice issues. But in general, I'm Sudanese American, and I think that's where I take a lot of my inspiration from, just seeing the issues that my community has experienced back in Sudan and kind of getting my motivation from that and truly wanting to use my skills and my passions to help people.
Definitely. No, the world itself is not just, one singular field. It is interdisciplinary, and that's what makes people, great. And being skilled in multiple fields like yourself is definitely something. Having passions in multiple fields too, definitely. So also, before I start, with the hard-hitting questions, I like to start off with, simple icebreaker questions to get the blood flowing, get the brain flowing, and all that. So if you could have a conversation with any superhero, who would it be and why?
Okay, this is a little bit non-traditional, but for all my people who grew up watching PBS, I'd want to have a conversation with Word Girl, because
definitely
I watched Word Girl so much growing up, and I think in general like PBS is where I took a lot of my like educational passions from, just because I always loved hopping on PBS, and Word Girl specifically like I think instilled in me a passion for like learning and learning beyond like what my school had, just because of like all the like ways they made learning fun.
No, definitely. I
want to have a conversation with Word Girl.
Definitely. I'm also a PBS kid myself. I grew up watching Wildcrafts was my favorite show growing up as a kid.
I hated Wildcrafts. Skipped it every time.
Wildcrafts was my show growing up. I was such a big guy when it came to like animals. I remember like watching it. I'd come home every day in like third grade and turn on the TV. It would be Nature Cat and then Odd Squad and then Wildcrafts. Odd Squad was my second favorite show behind Wildcrafts.
My favorite was Arthur.
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, it was Nature Cat, then Arthur, then Odd Squad, then Wildcrats. I would
Fair.
Nature Cat. It would be like because I got to go home early on like Fridays because my mom would like be an assistant, helping out with my classroom and stuff. So she'd bring us home early those days. But usually on normal days, I'd come home, I'd turn on the TV, I'd watch Arthur. It's really sad that it ended. It was really a good show. Arthur's definitely a show that I can still watch today, and it won't give that like little kid vibe.
No, I get that
Like,
for sure.
yeah, because like I tried watching Wildcrafts with my friends the other day. It gave that little kid vibe, but like with Arthur, it's not the same thing. It's just like life lessons in general that anyone at any age can learn.
Now you're inspiring me to watch an episode of Arthur after this. Oh my god.
Lucky I might have to myself, but it does definitely. I am a PBS kid myself, so I can definitely say we're coming with Word Girl. That would always play in like the morning, and it was like I don't remember watching too much of Word Girl like growing up as a kid. It'd be like there was this one other show. I forgot. It was like it was like a bunch of like animals and like stuff. The thing is, all the things in the town were like built with like words. I forgot what the show was called. If I remember, I'll tell you.
What
But
kind of
like,
PBS you watched?
yeah. Then there's like Thomas the Train. That would play consistently. It would annoy me as a kid. I'll be so honest. But
I was the kind of kid to like wake up early so I could watch before going to school.
oh, definitely no. I could never get up. I still can't get up early today. I'll be so honest. I'm the type to go after school and watch.
Fair.
That's my relax period because everyone needs a de-stressor after school. So, like you said, you have graduated. Once again, congratulations on graduating high school.
Thank you so much.
It is a big accomplishment. It's basically like finishing the tutorial stage. Now you're actually an adult, doing adult stuff.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
It's scary, but definitely. But you are a senior that has graduated, and you have mentioned that you committed to Columbia University. So what about Columbia, attracted you to commit there and, just apply there to begin with?
I really appreciate, obviously, the city that it's in, New York City. I really value diversity and open-mindedness, not only in myself, but in other people as well. So I want to be able to go to New York City and be able to experience and talk to people with diverse viewpoints, especially New York City is so culturally vast. So just being able to learn from not only the university I'm going to, but also the environment and the culture surrounding the university. And then specifically relating to Columbia, throughout my research into colleges, the school that I was considering as well as Columbia was MIT. And the reason why I chose to lean more towards like Columbia as opposed to like the MIT Stanford kind of route is because I wanted to go to a school that was kind of more liberal artsy. As someone who wants to go into computer science and math, I don't want my entire school environment to be like STEM focused. I want to be able to experience professors and students who are really passionate about the humanities as well, because I myself am passionate about kind of more like STEM leaning topics, although I do have some kind of like intersectional interests. I kind of lean more STEM, and over the past few years specifically, I think I've kind of inched more towards that like humanities realm in the sense of like policy and social justice. So I definitely want to explore that more throughout college. I also want to it kind of goes back to why I want to be in New York City as well. I kind of just want to consistently be around people with diverse viewpoints and diverse passions, because I think that's truly how you kind of learn what you yourself are passionate in, but that's also how you learn from other people as well.
Definitely. New York is the biggest city in the US, and New York is, New York at the end of the day. There's a lot happening in New York. And you're with Columbia, you're right there in the middle of all of it. Like, Times Square is only like 30 minutes away.
Yeah.
So you can always just visit Times Square if you ever want to. Columbia is in the middle of the city, so, you get that city life too. And obviously, I understand, you're going to STEM field and going to a liberal arts college, especially with everything that you've done. STEM-wise and humanities-wise, that definitely makes sense. And also, you did mention that you were a QuestBridge scholar, I believe. So
Yeah.
How did applying for QuestBridge and all that work?
So QuestBridge is a program that you apply to colleges through. And essentially how it works is there's two stages. So there's the finalist stage and there's the match stage. For the finalist stage, you kind of just apply to QuestBridge as an organization at large, and then they decide whether or not you're a finalist. And if you're a finalist, you get the chance to rank up to 15 of QuestBridge's partner schools, and then you get matched to one of those universities, hopefully. So you can get matched to a college anywhere on your list, or obviously you can not get matched, but ideally you get matched to a college anywhere on your list, and if you do match, then you're given a full ride.
Nice. Was Columbia like one of your top choices with QuestBridge?
Yeah, definitely. I was really reluctant doing QuestBridge. I kind of debated for so long whether I wanted to do QuestBridge or whether I just wanted to apply to all of my colleges via the common application. But I ended up obviously going with the QuestBridge route, but I definitely did not rank 15 colleges. I think I ranked like 4 maybe. So those 4 that I did rank, I was like 1,000% confident that if I were to match with one of those schools, I'd be happy going there. Just because I didn't want to rank like the whole 15 schools and then I get matched to like my 15th choice and I'm like, oh, what if I would have gotten into Columbia, kind of thing.
Yes. So with the matching system, does it only match you to like one school?
Yeah.
So it would basically be like whichever one's higher, that's the school you would match with, pretty much. Would that be it, or?
Not even necessarily. Kind of ominous thing about QuestBridge is you really don't know. If you match to like your 3rd school, for instance, you could have also gotten into your 1st and your 2nd. It's more QuestBridge kind of just develops a combination between your ranking, and then what happens on the other side is the schools that receive applications rank their applicants as well. So I'm assuming there's some kind of algorithm or something that matches like the student's ranking to the college's ranking, but they kind of just try to come up with the optimal solution for like all students.
So if you do QuestBridge, you can't go the Common App route anymore, can you?
No, you can't. If you match with QuestBridge, you can't, that is. So it's a form of early decision. So it does give you a full ride, but it is binding as well. So that's why I made sure to be 1,000% confident with the colleges that I ranked.
Yeah, definitely. Because, I mean, 1, it is a full ride, but 2, if it's binding, you know, it has to be a top college. If it's just like some college that you really didn't want to go to, like, is it really worth it? And is it really worth it at the end of the day? That's the real question, definitely.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
obviously, you were a QuestBridge scholar for a reason with all the extracurriculars that you have done. And speaking of extracurriculars, one of them would be you served as Indiana's executive director for ENCODE Justice, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. So what is ENCODE Justice's like goal, and how did you get involved with the organization?
Okay, ENCODE Justice, at large, it's an international nonprofit, like you mentioned, and it's a grassroots youth-led organization with the goal of promoting equitable artificial intelligence development. So essentially, ENCODE Justice as an organization like encapsulates my passions very well because it aims to combine kind of developing technology with social justice issues and ethics. So ENCODE Justice does a lot of policy work, but it also does a lot of like AI and technology advising work. But ultimately, its goal is to make sure that youth are involved in this kind of AI and technology development process and making sure that their perspectives, as well as ethics and social justice issues, are being considered along the way as well. So ENCODE Justice Indiana, which is what I lead, the Indiana chapter of ENCODE Justice, and we focused most of our work on AI as it relates to K-12 education. And different chapters kind of focus on different things depending on their state's political climate. A lot of states do a lot of like facial recognition work and a lot of campaigning in that sense. But we've really seen that education is an area that's lacking when it relates to AI policy. So that's the main thing we've been focusing on over the past 2-ish years. Honestly, the way I got involved was super random. I was just researching extracurriculars that kind of combined my passions, and at the time, I wasn't as interested in combining my passion for technology with the kind of like social justice and ethics work, just because I quite literally didn't know that those kinds of opportunities were available. So it was definitely something that I was interested in. I just kind of didn't have a means to explore that. So I think ENCODE Justice really gave me that route to explore that passion just a little bit more. And I quite literally found it through like a Google search researching like technology related extracurriculars I could do. And as soon as I saw it, it really spoke to me just because it kind of took that interdisciplinary approach to technology, which is something I say in the back of my mind and subconsciously I was always passionate about and leaning towards. But again, like I didn't really know that those kind of opportunities were a thing. So I definitely attribute a large part of my passion for the intersection of technology and social justice to ENCODE Justice, just because it showed me that kind of interdisciplinary work was possible.
Definitely. A Google search can help a lot these days. Did you get involved with ENCODE Justice like early on high school, like freshman, sophomore years? Or
Yeah, so I got involved with ENCODE Justice during the spring semester of my sophomore year. I originally joined ENCODE Justice as just one of their fellows through their fellowship program, and then I realized that they didn't have an Indiana chapter, but they had a lot of other state chapters. So I knew that I was very passionate about the work they were doing, so I started the Indiana chapter, which has definitely been a roller coaster, has taught me so much, but I'm so very grateful for the experience. I would definitely say earlier on in my journey with ENCODE Justice, I definitely kind of just watched what the organization was doing, and I think I learned a lot then. And then later on during like my junior year and my senior year, I was kind of able to kind of join their work a little bit more.
Definitely. So, in your opinion, how big, because you did say you were the founder of, the Indiana chapter, so how big do you feel like you've been able to grow, ENCODE Justice in Indiana?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to approach that question, just because I think the idea of how big can be answered by like how many members are in our chapter versus like the work we've actually done. We've had about 30 to 40 members in our chapter, and we've tried to have representatives from schools across the state of Indiana just to represent like that kind of diverse interests and political climates. But when it comes to the work we've been doing, most of the work we've been doing has been with stakeholders throughout Indiana. So the Department of Education is a really big one that we've been working with, as well as different Indiana legislators.
Like you did just mention, I was actually going to lead into my next question with ENCODE Justice, you were able to lead, integrate AI guidelines into Indiana education policy. Like you just mentioned, that is the main core of your 30 to 40 member group. So could you elaborate more on what these guidelines that you have been putting in pertain?
Yeah, of course. So the guidelines that you're referencing are encompassed within an Indiana House of Representatives bill that was introduced last legislative session. It was 1296. And primarily, the goal there was to increase awareness about how AI can be used in schools. So there's several components of the bill, but the main goal was to include students in kind of the policy-making process and the decision-making process, and make sure that students truly know how and why decisions about whether or not they can use AI are being executed. So one of the biggest components of our bill was making it so that school corporations or an individual teacher within a school corporation cannot punish a student unilaterally based on evidence produced by an AI detector. So, for example, if a teacher suspects that a student wrote an essay using AI, and they choose to test that by running it through GPT-0 for some. If GPT-0 said that this essay was like 75% plagiarized, it would make it so that a teacher cannot punish a student based solely on that information. And when we presented this idea to a lot of people, their first kind of thought was, okay, well, how are teachers supposed to navigate students using AI in their classrooms? But the main thing that we are trying to promote is transparency in this process. So transparency between students and educators, as well as a general sense of trust. And I think that trust really comes from the educational and awareness component. Just because when you think about these AI detectors, there's so much data proving that a lot of the times they are incorrect.
Yes.
And a lot of the times they discriminate specifically against people of color and international students. So I guess the main goal is to make sure that teachers have more guidance surrounding how they can use these AI tools and how they should police them within their classrooms.
Definitely. No, that is a massive problem in today's age. I am a victim of, the AI, plagiarism, like you just mentioned. I personally am a victim of that. So I can definitely, while you were speaking of it, I definitely had flashbacks. And no, not the prettiest of flashbacks, but flashbacks definitely. But it's also, at the end of the day, you're using AI to find out if AI is being used, if you think about it. And I was scrolling on TikTok today too. There was a professor at some Ivy League, he or some college. He's doing research on how AI is getting like these AIs like GPT-0 and turn it in, with its AI detection policy and stuff. How it's getting it wrong, through, even though the kid is not plagiarizing, or not plagiarizing, more like, not using AI, it's still detecting that it's AI. And some teachers just blindly follow that and, go into it, which I think is a massive problem. I definitely stand with what you are saying too, because, like I said, as someone that has dealt with this problem and had multiple friends, deal with this problem too, because AI is taking over and old people don't understand how to.
Yeah, definitely. And the main problem we've been seeing, which is why we kind of wanted to start this work in the first place, was there are so many teachers and administration throughout the state, and that we have personally experienced, like interacting with, who simply don't have the capacity to know how these advancing technologies work. So one thing that our bill advocated for was more guidance and professional development for parents, teachers, and administration, just so they're aware of how AI is impacting their learning, and so they can continue to kind of teach the students based off of their training as well that they're getting from professionals.
Definitely. We should probably, maybe you should try bringing this to Tennessee too. Maybe it'll help here.
Another main thing that the bill accomplishes that I was really fond of was it was supposed to mandate that each school corporation develops an AI policy. And the reason why this is important is because currently, let's take my school for example, teacher to teacher, there's different policies that they have relating to technology use and AI use. And obviously, this can differ significantly based off of their classroom structure as well as the subjects that they're teaching. But there's currently no uniform structure. There's nothing that students can turn to and say, okay, because this says this, I can't use AI on this project. Or because this says this, I can. So it kind of goes back to that overall goal of encouraging a sense of transparency between students and their educators. And that comes with a sense of trust in the fact that if there is a policy, they kind of will use that as guidance. But it also goes back to that educational component. When teachers are educated about how AI is used in their classroom, they're also able to tailor the assignments that they're assigning to their students to make sure that the assignments kind of align with the AI age, if that makes sense. Specifically, I believe it's a study produced by Yale's Poorvu Center of Learning. Sorry, I could have completely butchered the name, but it's definitely Yale's Poorvu Center. And it kind of gives examples to teachers of how they can better tailor their assignments to be more like AI proof and kind of lean towards like promoting academic integrity more. So that's definitely something that we wanted to encourage throughout this like professional development process for educators.
Definitely. And like you did mention, you put this onto the bill. Would this be the Indiana House Bill 1296? Okay. That basically just answers my next question then, because I was gonna ask what the bill entails, but you've said so much about you know your passions behind the bill and passing the bill. Have y'all done anything else other than this like bill per se with ENCODE Justice? Have you like worked with them on a national level yourself, as you are the founder of the Indiana chapter?
Yeah, so ENCODE Justice, the way it's been structured as a whole, was there's definitely like the executives within ENCODE Justice, but then there's like the high school state chapters. And there's definitely collaborations between neighboring state chapters, but we've kept most of our work within Indiana just because Indiana has such a unique political climate when compared to some of the other states. And I think that's really the goal of the state chapter program within ENCODE Justice, to make sure that our initiatives are very grassroots and very tailored to those individual states and what the states are experiencing. Just because definitely there's different things that work for different states. I remember I hopped on a call once with two of our executives to receive feedback on a draft of HB 1296. And I was kind of just asking questions about how to continue championing this bill and how to continue like rallying support. And they both have worked for ENCODE Justice on the national level. They've worked on a lot of the California ENCODE Justice bills that have been sponsored. And I think through talking with them, I really realized just how much you have to tailor solutions to work for different states, just because like Indiana's political climate is significantly different when compared to California's. And
Yeah.
a big challenge that we've had to work through within the Indiana chapter, just making sure that the bill comes off as like completely nonpartisan and not leaning any specific way. Just because the issue of AI in education is a nonpartisan issue. But depending on who introduces it and who champions it, it can lean one way or the other. So I think that's really a challenge that we've had to navigate, just because the main people from ENCODE Justice who worked on HB 1296 have been myself and my former vice president of the chapter. And we definitely both like lean the same way and we have the same kind of thoughts. But a challenge that we've had to navigate was making sure that it kind of comes off in a way that would be received well by these legislators.
Definitely. The fact that both of y'all think the same, helps. Maybe there's times where y'all have disagreements, but having the same ideas and stuff, definitely, especially when you're going against a big I want to say threat. That's a negative connotation word for this situation. A bigger entity like the the Indiana House of Representatives and the Indiana Senate. Definitely. And like you said, no state has the same political climate as the next. There are states for a reason. California is dealing with different stuff than, Indiana. Indiana's dealing with different stuff from like Tennessee, because, there's different locations like geographically, politically, like, yeah, geographically, that plays a big role into how it is. So obviously I can definitely see where you're coming from when you did say that you kept it in Indiana borders, definitely. Speaking of, Indiana, work that you have done, you have also spearheaded many youth gun violence prevention initiatives on behalf of the Indianapolis MYLC. So what was your inspiration for joining this movement?
Of course. So I joined the Indianapolis Men's Youth Leadership Council during kind of the end of my sophomore year, with the goal of staying in it throughout junior and senior year, because we're only eligible for 2 years. But I would say through talking with other members on the council, you're kind of trying to figure out what an issue would be that youth experience that is kind of very pertinent in Indianapolis specifically. And we really wanted to make sure that this was an issue where youth could get involved. And in Indianapolis, a really big issue is gun violence. And it's specifically a really big issue when it comes to the youth population within Indianapolis as compared to the adult population. So considering being on the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council, we had a lot of backing from the Commission on Youth as well as the city of Indianapolis. So we really wanted to make sure that this was an issue that we could target, specifically just because the issue of gun regulation and gun violence in general is such a culture war topic in our society. But when you think about the issue of gun violence prevention and the harm that gun violence is having on youth, that's not necessarily something that is like widely disagreed upon. But when you think about the connotation that it has just because of the way like guns are involved, people try to stay away from conversations like those just because of the polarization that's present in like our wider society as well as within Indiana. So I think we really wanted to kind of touch on a topic that people were scared to touch on, but that would receive a lot of support in a way that'd be able to help our community.
Definitely, gun violence just in general is a big problem nowadays. Obviously, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, and it is top 3 in the nation for gun violence and crime rates. I have seen this, personally affect my community at hand. And, Indianapolis is also a major metropolitan area in, the eastern part of the U.S. Indianapolis is a big deal, especially with everything that's happened, recently. I know the streets are going to get rowdy, very rowdy, especially with obviously you're in Indiana, so you probably did hear about the Pacers, making the NBA finals. So I know the streets are about to get rowdy up there because when the NBA team makes an NBA finals, the streets go crazy. I'll just let you know that for sure.
Yeah.
So speaking of the Pacers, your work a part of, the Mayor Youth Leadership Council has, earned recognition from the Indiana Pacers themselves. Like I mentioned, an NBA team that is currently playing for an NBA championship, and also the Indiana Senate, while also collaborating with 15 plus other organizations. So how were y'all able to, make these connections with, these 15 plus organizations and the Pacers and,
Yeah, I would say the way we were able to go about receiving support from these organizations, as well as kind of partnering with them in the first place, kind of the motive behind that was a lot of the times there's many organizations in Indianapolis that have the goal of kind of supporting gun violence victims and working towards gun violence prevention. There's so many of these kinds of organizations. But the problem is these organizations always have their separate events. These organizations have their separate events and they kind of have the same supporters and the same voices that are being heard. And they kind of get less of a turnout when compared to when all of these organizations that have a similar mission come together. So the event that we organized, it was a community peace walk, which is specifically why we wanted to make sure to bring together all of these organizations, because we wanted to bring together our community. And I think a lot of the times our community tends to be very separated, and we kind of wanted to challenge that narrative that our community needs to be separated by working to bring together these organizations that have similar goals, but often lack the capacity to work together just because of how separated our community is. So when it comes to reaching out to these different organizations, honestly, that part wasn't hard. Just because these organizations are so fantastic, they're so willing to do the work, and they're wanting to do the work. It's just our community is separated, and we need to kind of approach that issue and make sure that we have a means for the entire community to be kind of joined together again. So when it came to actually like reaching out to these organizations, that part was the easy part. It was kind of the idea behind like challenging the narrative that our community needs to be separated that was more difficult.
No, definitely no community is, it's a house. I forgot the quote. I think it was like a Lincoln that said it, but it was like a house that's not divided or something like that. But a community, they're not divided, but they're also like different people, and you need that one leader like you and the rest of your MYLC crew to build this leadership back up and, fight for a good change in our communities. Definitely. So how has this journey, part of the MYLC, changed you as a person, your perspective on, life and maybe even a career prospect itself?
Okay. I would say, in general, kind of one of the main differences when I think about my experience with the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council as opposed to, let's say, the work I've done within ENCODE Justice. I really love the work that I've been able to do with the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council and the overall experience that I've been able to have because it so directly relates to the community that I've grown up in and the community that I've been kind of most able to directly experience these issues myself. So I think it's really great to be able to kind of see your work personally impacting your community and kind of being able to give back to the community that raised you and instilled you with these values that make you want to go out and help the world. So I definitely love the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council, and I think it taught me that there's so many organizations that kind of are bigger and they'll receive more recognition for sure, and they're kind of bigger names. But I think the work that you do that's really important is the work that kind of speaks to you and your experiences, because leveraging your experiences will always lead to the best results, just because you're building solutions that are grounded in the reality of people's real lived experiences. And I'd say that's a theme across the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council as well as the previous work I've mentioned within ENCODE Justice, is we've really tried to make sure that the solutions that are being presented to legislators, to communities, to educators, to administration, just our Indianapolis and Indiana community at large, are grounded in the reality of youth lives. So I'm really passionate about youth advocacy, and I think ENCODE Justice and the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council have really instilled that within me. And it showed me that people really do want to listen to you. You just have to be willing to go out into your community and kind of spearhead this work. I really love the community that I've been able to form within kind of the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council as well as the organizations that have partnered with us, because as soon as they see someone who's young willing to kind of take a leadership position, everyone steps back and they want young people to step up and lead these initiatives. And it's really inspiring just because you can kind of see that there are people who are young and willing to make the world a better place. And
we are the next generation, so yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. It's really just nice to be able to see this kind of work being done and pushed by the younger generation, because it's really inspiring. And I think especially when you're in a time that has a lot of people very nervous, very scared, and very scared for their own futures, it's nice to be able to kind of have that community that continues to inspire you. So I think that's something I've really learned within my work within the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council, just how to continue being inspired and how to lead not only a group filled with young people, but also adults as well, and adults who are willing to work with you, obviously.
Definitely. Like you said, give back to the community that has given you so much. That was one of my campaign. I'm currently serving as Tennessee FBLA state vice president, so that was one of the main points that I hit while I was on my campaign trail, giving back to the community that has given you so much. No person is themselves. Their community is what makes them, them. That makes them unique to their situation. So have you ever thought about taking some ideas that you've had for ENCODE Justice and implementing them with the Mayor Youth Leadership Council, or vice versa in any way whatsoever?
Yeah, I would say I've definitely learned similar things from both organizations, but the Mayor's Youth Leadership Council kind of has a more local scope, being within the city of Indianapolis, while ENCODE Justice kind of takes that broader approach and considers the whole state through legislative approaches. But there's definitely overlap between the two in the sense that they're both promoting youth-led approaches to social justice issues. There's been a lot of intersection for me personally. There was a youth day at the State House last year. I was able to speak on behalf of both the Indianapolis Mayor's Youth Leadership Council and ENCODE Justice. So just being able to kind of champion these issues together from more of like a youth-based perspective. Also, the same legislator that I worked with for the ENCODE Justice bill, her name is Representative Sue Arrington. She's also now working on a lot of gun violence prevention approaches within the entire state of Indiana. So I've been able to talk to her a lot about kind of the initiatives that I've been leading within the Indianapolis Mayor's Youth Leadership Council. And she's been able to take inspiration from the work that's been done throughout Indianapolis, as well as the connections that the Indianapolis Mayor's Youth Leadership Council has been able to develop with other organizations. So we've definitely connected with a lot of legislators, and that's kind of where the most impact comes from, just because through our advocacy, they're able to see the issues that their stakeholders really care about. And a lot of legislators truly want to represent their constituents well.
Definitely. Yeah, you can always take two ideas and put them into one, which you have just, discussed. So definitely. But not only are you an activist at heart, but you also are a published researcher. Circling back to ENCODE Justice and the work that you've done with them, not only have you passed Indiana HB 1296, but you also were able to write a legislative analysis paper on AI in K-12 schools. So as a high school, or should I say former high school student,
don't say that.
But as a high school student, seeing AI started blooming when my freshman year, so that means that would be your sophomore year. So seeing that blooming until in your own high school itself, did that help you while you were writing this paper, like the first person point of view?
Definitely. And I think the paper was kind of delivered from the student perspective. And for me personally, I've attended 2 high schools throughout my high school career. So kind of seeing the difference in how they handled AI policy was something that really inspired me to write this paper. The high school that I graduated from is a 2-year high school and is a residential high school. So everyone had previously come from different high schools throughout the entire state of Indiana. So being able to interact with people from the entire state really showed me that there's no uniform understanding when it comes to how AI should be used within high schools. And that was kind of the main thing that we were trying to promote, is uniformity across the state, in the sense that our schools need to be guided because individually they kind of lack this guidance. And we found that there's no one person that knows what to do. Teachers don't know what to do. They turn to admin. Admin doesn't know what to do. And ultimately, we think the Department of Education should be the one to handle this, just because they're the ones able to promote the most uniformity throughout the state.
Definitely. Like you said, they are the ones in control, so obviously they would have the power to, make these changes and stuff. So, along with your work with the HB 1296, was that along with your first person point of view, were those like the main reasons you would say you felt like you were writing this paper, or if was not just you and your team?
So actually, the paper came before we started the bill.
Okay.
So the paper was kind of us trying to present our point to these legislators and kind of show them that we represent a wide range of students throughout the state of Indiana, and we're kind of seeing these issues firsthand. So our paper talked about the issues that we saw, and it also discussed potential solutions as well as the stakeholders and people who could approach the issue and try to implement these solutions. So we wrote the paper in spring semester of my junior year. And then throughout the summer, as well as the fall semester of my senior year, we kind of sent these papers to different stakeholders. So we sent them to every legislator within the House of Representatives, and kind of from there was where we were trying to find these partners for our bill.
Definitely. So the paper, if not the bill, came from the paper. The bill did come from the paper, not the paper come from the bill. Definitely. That makes a lot more sense now that I'm thinking about it in my head.
Yeah, we are. We're also currently working on writing an op-ed just about the issue at large and how, what we've kind of learned from the process of writing the bill, as well as what needs to be done still in the state.
I've had to deal with op-eds in AP Lang, so I've gotten familiar with those. We had a research project in AP Lang. It was to research something that happened in our community, and there was a trial going around at the time on, police violence and police brutality, if you know about Tyree Nichols. So that was my research. But then obviously, op-ed, that was one of the requirements that we had to have, having an op-ed with. So op-eds definitely are ways to see the world in different lens, because op-ed stands for it's like opposing, is that opposing view?
Editorial.
Yes, opinion. Yeah, exactly. Opinion is how you see the world in different lens. So definitely. And not only have you done research on, humanities sides with education, but you also did research at Yale University for, and you won't believe me when I say this, comp nuclear physics. Those nuclear and then physics, two of the craziest, hardest things ever. I took physics one of the hardest classes I've ever taken, content wise. And then you add the word nuclear on top. That's some crazy stuff. So what did your research with the Yale University and comp nuclear physics, deal with?
Yeah, so at Yale, I work on the Project 8 neutrino mass measurement experiment. And Project 8 in general, it's an international consortium with the goal of measuring the mass of a neutrino. So this project isn't a project that's being executed just at Yale. There's several partner universities across the United States as well as internationally. And there's also national labs working on the same project. So I really enjoyed working for the Project 8 experiment just because of that collaborative nature. It's really interesting being able to collaborate with folks internationally to be able to solve this issue and approach different projects. And I think that's really one of the unique aspects behind Project 8 that I've really grown from and I've really loved. But essentially, what Project 8 does, well, I'm not sure how physicsy you want me to get, but...
Your choice.
Okay, the Project 8 experiment, it's a novel approach to neutrino mass measurement, like I mentioned before. And the way it does this is when atomic tritium undergoes beta minus decay, the products that are produced are helium-3, an electron, and an electron neutrino. And obviously, you can measure how much atomic tritium is going into this beta decay. So the same amount should come out, but it's split between these three byproducts. So it's easy to measure the helium-3 because there's a large quantity of it. So what you have left is the neutrino and the electron. So essentially, this kind of logic comes from the conservation of energy. What the Project 8 experiment does is it watches the electron as its energy approaches zero. And to put it in simple terms, it kind of bounces around in this magnetic trap until it reaches an energy of zero. And when its energy is zero, its mass is zero, meaning the only mass of substance that's left is the mass of the neutrino. So that's kind of how they're able to deduce the mass of the neutrino. But it's really interesting because the neutrino is said to have mass in the standard model for particle physics, which is the basis for the entire field of particle physics, which deeply informs nuclear physics as well. So being able to work on a project that quite literally disproves the standard model for particle physics is super interesting, just because so many things have been built upon the standard model, and once this model is completely disproved, that kind of sets a lot of chaos in the field, which a lot of people will think about it in different ways, but it's just kind of a very significant step in the particle physics realm. So it's something I've really found fascinating.
It does sound like you're very passionate. I know with what you were saying, I did hear a little bit of chemistry along, so definitely the fact you're able to explain it in that detail shows how much passion and how much work you have put into it. Was it obviously because you're in Indiana, it was an online, based thing, right?
Yeah, so I started working for the Project A experiment during the summer of my sophomore year. And the way I was able to do that is I applied for a research program through the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And I was matched to the lab at UIUC that hosts the Project A experiment. So throughout my 2 months there, I really grew fascinated by the experiment as a whole. I was really interested in physics at the time. At the time, I wanted to double major in computer science and physics. I no longer want to do physics. Physics C kind of destroyed me. But yeah, so I no longer want to do physics. But at the time, I was really fascinated in physics, and I was really interested in the intersection of computer science and physics. I still am, just kind of less interested on the physics side, more interested in the computer science side. But I joined the lab that hosted the Project A experiment at UIC for 2 months, really loved it, and then I wanted to continue the work throughout the school year as well as the next summer as well. So I started essentially just cold emailing different professors within the Project A collaboration and seeing if any one of them would be willing to host me as kind of a remote intern for their specific lab. So a lot of emailing.
Definitely. Cold emailing is the way to go for sure.
Really?
I've done my fair share of cold emailing and a lot of rejections, but I've had a couple of yeses, which is with you can get like 20 rejections, but one yes can change a lot.
Literally, yeah. And I think a lot of the times it's how people tend to approach research. I've done so much random research. Like my freshman year, I wanted to, I don't think that I actually wanted to do this. I think I was probably just holding on to like the hopes of like becoming a doctor. But I told myself that I was going to major in computational biology with the goal of like eventually becoming a doctor. And since then, I realized that I only wanted to do the computer science part, and the biology part was just me holding on to like my dream from like 5 years old. Nonetheless, I did microbiome research for like about a month during my freshman year. So random. I'm never stepping foot in a biolab again. Then the next summer I did material physics research at Indiana University, and it was the same university that I did my microbiome research at, funny enough. But that's also the same summer where I joined the Project A experiment. So I've kind of dabbled all over the place, did some microbiome, did some material physics, now I'm doing like nuclear particle physics. But I think along the way, really all of those experiences have led me to really appreciate computer science. And one like long-term career that I'm really considering is kind of developing like research technology, because throughout working in all of these different labs, I've realized that a lot of the technology that they use is very outdated, specifically within the biology lab. I remember I had to use like so many wires and like all of these like desktop things just to like transfer data. And I knew in the back of my mind, like I knew I could probably write a Python script that could do it quicker. But at the time I was kind of more trying to lean into that bio side. But I've realized the same thing throughout my physics research as well. A lot of the times computer science works really well with research just because of like how they complement each other and how computer science allows research to develop a lot smoother, a lot quicker, and kind of just optimizes it at large. While I did say I will never step foot in a biolab again, I do think that experience has taught me a lot about kind of where I want to use my computer science skills.
Definitely. Like you said, you have dabbled everywhere in the science field, but not only have you dabbled everywhere in the science field, you have basically dabbled in every field possible. You've done STEM and you've done humanities. So obviously you did say you wanted to be a, doctor as a kid, and that pushed you more towards STEM, but why have you pushed more yourself for like STEM while you've done so much in humanities itself too?
I think the main things I've done within the humanities have been things that I've explored within the last couple of years. I'd say growing up, I always considered myself like a STEM kid. I was always really interested in math, and like I'm going to major in math. So that's been something that's like has been consistent all my life. And then since early middle school, I've known that I've wanted to major in computer science. But I feel like generally there's kind of a narrative pushed forth in society at large that kind of makes people go one way or the other. I've always known that I've been interested in STEM. So in my mind, like I was a STEM kid and humanities just kind of like weren't for me. But after my sophomore year, I transferred schools and I went to the Indiana Academy, which is a boarding school in Muncie, Indiana. It's on Ball State University's campus. And at the academy, I wouldn't say the academy leans one way or the other. It has a lot of humanities classes, but it also has a lot of STEM classes. I've been able to take some crazy math classes that I've like really appreciated learning a lot from. But I've also been able to take some humanities classes that have really pushed me to explore differing perspectives. And I've really valued the kind of shift in thinking that it's promoted for me, which is why I've leaned a lot of my work the humanities route as well. But also, a lot of my humanities work is rooted in social justice, and I would say it's kind of inherent to who I am as a person. I mean, growing up, really wanting to do something in the STEM field, so many people have told me, and society has said that, like, I'm not someone who belongs in STEM. And there's been so many, like, high math classes and like high like physics classes that I've been in that have just been like white men left and right, and like I'm the only like girl, black person, Muslim person. So I think in general I've seen the way that these societal narratives can kind of really make someone feel as if they don't belong in these fields. And so I think that's really leaned me to kind of go the more like social justice route, because I've kind of grown up surrounded by these inequalities, and it's really instilled in me passion to kind of challenge the narratives that are being pushed forth.
Definitely, which was obviously going to lead to my next question. You do take massive pride in your Sudanese heritage. So how do you feel like your culture as a Sudanese American, has impacted you as a person, your day-to-day life and, your outlook?
Yeah, so I think just based off of like my family and Sudanese culture at large, I've always been told like education is important because education is what kind of provides you social mobility, or like educational mobility in general, and mobility to be able to do the kinds of things that you want to do. So I've really taken pride in my education ever since I've started school, and my parents have really pushed me to kind of go to the max, and like there will always be more for you to explore. I mean, I grew up as like kind of very much a perfectionist. I remember like in 5th grade, this is so specific, but I remember in 5th grade, for like my spelling tests that I would bring home, I'd get like 100 on like every one, and my dad every time was like, there was extra credit, why didn't you get 105?
Oh no, definitely. No. I think that's really just like the immigrant like mindset too, because my parents are the exact same. Growing up, they were the exact same. With like grades and everything, they would get mad if I didn't bring home the best possible grades. I remember like in 5th grade too, I remember I failed this like math like checkpoint, right? I was supposed to get it like signed. If it wasn't like an A or a B, if I brought it home, I would never show my parents. I would like hide it in my backpack. And then they would see the grades and be like, oh, good job. And then I'd slip into C or D. And then sometimes I'd get Fs and I'd have to get it signed. Because it was like one question checkpoints. How are you, if you get that one question wrong, it's a 0. Like, yeah. So I definitely understand, that is the immigrant struggle too. Definitely.
Yeah, but I think it's definitely something, like, I think it definitely led to like a sense of perfectionism, which like I've grappled more with over the past few years, and I think I've been able to overcome. But I think beyond that, it also instills kind of this mentality that there always is more, and that you should never limit yourself. I mean, my same parents who like instilled this mentality within me. Like, I take a lot of my motivation from them, just because like I'm really inspired by their story and a lot of Sudanese immigrants like them because of the way like they've been able to like completely restart their lives in the United States and kind of like build everything from the ground up. And that's due solely to like their work ethic and their mentality that if they believe it can be done, then it can be done. So I think I've really just kind of tried to build upon that mentality. I think my culture and my background has really inspired me to take advantage of any opportunity that comes my way. And even if there's not these opportunities, make sure that you are putting yourself in a position where you can seek out these opportunities. So just really making sure that you're leveraging yourself to your full potential, and that if you have an interest, you go all the way within that interest, and just make sure that you're really like putting your best self forward and that you're really challenging yourself in every sense of your life.
What is your favorite part about your culture?
I would definitely say it's how open everyone is, how willing people are to help each other, and just how collaborative and supportive any Sudanese person is. And I think it's really prevalent throughout the entire Sudanese community at large. I mean, there's so many I think I actually wrote one of my college essays about this, funny enough. But whenever like someone who I thought was a family friend would come over to my house, so many family friends you can't keep count. So whenever someone I thought was a family friend would come over, if I had never seen them before, I would always wonder in the back of my head, like, is this their first time meeting? Have they like known each other? And there's been so many times where like it's been my parents' first time meeting someone, but I didn't even know that it was their first time meeting them, just based off of how close they seemed from like the first interaction, just based off of kind of the mutual connection of being Sudani and just having that open vibe to them. I think a lot of Sudanese people are very, very generous, and I've definitely seen that like within my parents and within like the Sudanese community in Indianapolis as well. They're very supportive in the sense that like they're always willing to go out of their way to do something for somebody else, even if that person isn't necessarily asking for it or like soliciting it in any way. And I think those kind of traits are ultimately rooted in a lot of communities that have faced significant struggle. And I think from struggle comes community. I feel like there's always a positive way to look at like a negative situation. And I feel like there's a very strong sense of community in third world countries a lot of the time, just because it's something they really value, as opposed to like the materialistic society that I think is very present in the United States. So I think kind of having the duality between like being Sudanese but being born in the United States and growing up in an American society has really benefited me a lot, because I've grown up surrounded by this like supportive, generous, and like uplifting Sudanese community that's really instilled in me these values. So I really kind of want to spread that to the community around me and the community in Indianapolis that has kind of helped me grow as a person.
Definitely. I can relate with the family friends thing. I joke with my dad, like my dad knows every Indian in the town of Memphis. Like there are so many people, like if one of my friends comes over, right? First thing he does, what is your last name? Because then he connects like my friend to his dad, and he's like, oh, I know him from like somewhere random. So, it's definitely, I've had random people just sitting in my house and like never seen this person before, but it's like someone my dad's known for a long time. I'm like, okay.
No, that's so understandable. One of the other Coke scholars is also Sudanese, which I was really happy to see. And the second I told my parents about it, they were like, oh, what's her last name? Probably know her.
Yeah,
And she's from like, somewhere like far east. Like,
exactly.
so I think it's definitely so great just seeing that community, even when you don't personally know someone, and just knowing that there's a community that you can connect to, despite not being kind of directly connected to that community in the sense that you know the people, but you know what they're going to be like in the sense that they're still going to support you and they're still going to feel like family, even when it's the first time you've seen them.
Definitely. That feeling of, family, that is something that's run root, especially for me, having a large Indian community. In India, there's multiple different, communities. We're all Indian, but there's also like different languages inside. I speak Telugu,
Yeah.
so Telugu runs very deep here, the Memphis area, and just like around the U.S. in general. That's just how every community is, especially as immigrants. Knowing someone that's similar to you definitely gets that feeling of home, for sure.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the kind of idea of mutual understanding that comes from having like a cultured background. As I've grown like more confident in my Sudanese culture and I've grown to learn more about it, I've really appreciated having the opportunity to use it as a means of connecting to people who may not be Sudanese or even like East African or Arab at all. At my school, I founded the Middle Eastern North African Student Union during my first year there, so my junior year. And I'd say like it's not something that has had like a lot of like measurable impact. Like obviously like it's a school club, but I've learned so much from it, and I know that a lot of people in my grade have been more educated on Arab culture because of it, and that's been really inspiring to me just because I've seen the way people are really receptive to learning about the aspects of Arab, Middle Eastern, and Sudanese culture that we've kind of been trying to promote using the Middle Eastern North African Student Union. So I really appreciate the sense of like open-mindedness that gets promoted when you're talking about your culture with someone who has a completely different culture. It's kind of related, but one of my best friends, and actually who I wrote HB 1296 with, Vice President of ENCODE Justice, I mentioned before that we have similar ideas, and we definitely do when it comes to like political leanings and like deeply rooted values, but we've developed them in completely different ways. Like I mentioned, I'm Sudanese American. I've lived in Indianapolis my entire life, but my best friend is a white guy who lives in like rural Indiana, and we're so different. But I've learned so much from just like being around him and being able to learn from kind of the environment that he's grown up in and what values he has because of that. And I'd say he's definitely learned a lot from me in that sense. And I can't say developing our friendship has been easy. Had a lots of rocky moments, but I think the kind of tough conversations and the rocky moments and just at large a willingness to like be vulnerable, open, and open-minded with someone kind of breeds a really good connection. And that's something that I've learned just throughout my high school experience, is how to like connect with people from different backgrounds and the kind of like understanding that you can gauge from that.
Definitely. We all come from different backgrounds. Even if it's like from different opposing, not opposing, but like, different areas, having the same values, we all have different life experiences. That's what makes us, us. So definitely I can see where you're coming from with that. Also, you did, serve as Indiana TSA secretary and vice president. So how were your 2 terms like? Obviously, CTSOs are a very big thing in, America, in the US itself, and obviously I'm involved with FBLA like I did mention earlier. So you were obviously in the same boots as I am now, but with TSA. So how was that experience?
It was a really fantastic experience. I definitely say I learned a lot when it came to the idea of like collaborating with the other state officers as well as our state advisor and the rest of the Indiana TSA board has been fantastic, just because I think it goes back to the idea of like youth advocacy that I've mentioned throughout my previous extracurriculars, just because being on the state officer team has really allowed me to kind of voice my ideas to the Indiana TSA board. And once again, like, I really think adults, so many of them are so willing to listen to students who are passionate and students who are willing to go out of their way to advocate for what they care about. So just being able to advocate for the changes that I thought were beneficial to Indiana TSA was really insightful for me, just because it showed me a lot about like communication and advocacy when it comes from youth to adults. And I think there's a big difference between like youth to youth advocacy and youth to adult advocacy, and obviously adult to adult, just because of like inherent like power dynamics that come across in conversations. But you really see those kind of being taken away when it comes to a lot of these advocacy organizations, because people truly do want to listen to you when you're passionate, because you are passionate for a reason.
Exactly.
And I feel like people who are passionate are a lot of the times very drawing, and people just want to listen to them. So it's just really showed me a lot about, I guess, like voicing my ideas and making sure I communicate them effectively to other people. I've also really appreciated the kind of awareness events that I've been able to attend as a state officer in a career and technical student organization, just because I'm really interested in public policy and advocacy at large. And through Indiana TSA, I've been able to advocate for CTSOs on kind of a more like legislative level. We visited the State House multiple times, and like at tables at the State House have had the opportunity to talk to so many legislators in our state officer positions and advocate for more funding for our organizations and more funding for this kind of education throughout schools. So I really appreciated just kind of the way people are so open towards like listening to you, but also I've learned how to effectively voice my ideas, as well as how to kind of just communicate across different like power dynamics in a sense, because obviously like as a student, people are always going to like consider you like you essentially like have no background, and your background is kind of just solely passion. So having these like administrators, legislators, as well as like decision makers at large listen to you solely based off of your passion has been something that's I've really appreciated, just because like I've learned how to effectively like structure and use the passion that I have for technology and social justice, and it's just really overall been an amazing experience.
Definitely. What was your favorite competition a part of TSA?
I did one TSA competition, and because most of my time was spent as a state officer.
Yes.
I became a state officer during my first year in TSA, and TSA officers are very limited when it comes to the kinds of competitions they can do.
Yes. One of my teammates, he's currently serving as Tennessee TSA's state president. I also do TSA in my school. Last year he was Tennessee TSA's state secretary. It was so hard to coordinate with him. We did music production, me, him, and then two other guys. He wasn't there for our interview round because, he was busy. He had a seminar at the exact same time as our scheduled interview, so we couldn't make it, and we were stressing out the whole time. So I definitely see where you're coming from especially with, the timings and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it's kind of bad, but the one competition that I did do is one of the competitions that you can pre-submit, and it was essays on technology, and I wrote about AI regulation and specifically AI detectors and why
obviously you have like experience in that, so it does help too. Yeah.
Why they're not like entirely accurate and other like means should be used when it comes to like education and awareness at large. And then I was disqualified because they flagged it for AI. I wrote that essay, I promise. So
no, TSA is super strict when it comes to like submission stuff too. Like I did digital video production and music production, and we had to recheck it over and over and over again, because like TSA is super strict with like what's submitted and like how it's submitted. Otherwise it's super easy to get disqualified, which is like low-key kind of annoying, but also at the same time like it makes sense, definitely.
Yeah. But I couldn't even say that I was mad. I just found it more funny because like, come on.
You're writing about AI and it gets flagged by AI.
Yeah, literally. And I particularly felt bad because I served as the state vice president, and our state president, who I was pretty close with, she had won the competition for 3 years in a row ever since she started high school, and she also submitted an entry for the same competition, and her essay was also disqualified for AI use, and both of us didn't use AI, but I can't say that I cared all too much about my result for that competition, but I particularly felt bad for her just because she had one for 3 years, and she could have made it.
They're super strict with AI. You know, I'm also part, like I mentioned, a part of my school's TSA, and this past year was my first year a part of TSA. You know, my school, they're very selective with TSA. They're out of like 100 applications, they only let 30 in. I applied like prior 2 years I've been in high school. This was the first year I got in because I advocated myself like crazy. My friends know me as a like music guru. I basically helped the music production team like past 2 years, you know, help them get into like, this stuff. So, and also TSA, it's very, very big when it comes to like STEM, everything. And especially I am a filmmaker. I enjoy films, making films, watching films. So digital video production was something. And we did place second at the state level.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah, thank you. My team is going to nationals for that. Unfortunately, I can't due to FBLA being at the exact same time. And obviously, like, I'm a state officer for FBLA, so I have to go for that. So,
yeah, understandable.
Yeah, definitely. But, you know, I'm hoping my team can take it all the way, you know, bring the gold home for, you know, for us. But definitely. You know, serving as a CTSO, I've heard that the experience is amazing, and obviously you've done it for 2 years in a row. The bonds you make, the people you meet, the experiences, definitely. And I'm excited to, you know, embark on this journey myself. You know, definitely. We have state training actually in like 2 days, Tuesday through Thursday. So that's gonna be the first time me and my team are actually able to like sit in a room other than like SLC to, you know, work as a team too. So I'm excited.
One thing that the Indiana CTSOs do, which I really like, is we do a joint state officer training, but we also have our individual state officer trainings. So I really appreciate the joint one because I think it's really nice to be able to hear from the other CTSOs.
Yes.
Being able to
we also are doing joint. Yeah. We're also doing joint as well too. Like me and my friend are traveling. Like he's part of the TSA state officer team. So we both are traveling these next couple of days, you know, as all 6 Tennessee CTSOs together. So yeah, definitely that joint too, you know, it brings a lot more ideas into the table for not just us, but you know, for the other 5, and you know, we can contribute and so forth. So yeah, definitely. Yeah. So with all of these crazy accomplishments, you know, vastly amongst all different fields, you were awarded the Coca-Cola 2025 Coca-Cola Scholarship. You are a 2025 Coca-Cola Scholar. So how was this process, you know, going through your head, and how was that experience, you know, going down to Georgia and making a lot of new friends and, you know, being added to a crazy network of people?
Okay, so the whole experience of applying was honestly surreal just because I truly didn't think I was going to get it. For the semifinals application, I mentioned this previously, but for the semifinals application, honestly, I can't say that I put all too much effort into it because it's due the same day as the rest of my college applications. And I honestly debated applying or continuing my application past the semifinalist point just because I genuinely thought I wasn't going to get it. But I was like, I'm not gonna let myself like become consumed by like future what ifs. So let me just submit this. So I submitted it, and then I became a regional finalist, and I was so shocked. I was so grateful, but I was so shocked just because those essays were like copy and paste from my college essays, and like, yeah. But I was super stoked to be a regional finalist, and then beyond like the regional finalist stage, they do interviews. And the interview was honestly the craziest interview I've ever experienced. I believe there were 3 or 4 interviewers, and it's like a 15-minute or 20-minute time slot. And I'm a part of the National Center for Women in Information Technology Network because I received a national NCWIT award last year. So because of that, I had made a few friends that went on to become Coke Scholars in the cohort above me. So I was asking them like what the interview process would be like, and one of my friends was like, yeah, to be honest, it's kind of insane. I know someone who mentioned that they do speech and debate, and they were asked to do impromptu on the spot. So I was like, okay, we're just gonna go for it. So I hop on. They kind of just asked me a few questions. They were very random. One thing I was prepared to do is give them my favorite Coke product, but they didn't ask that question. Because because I had seen on like Reddit that they asked that question, so I was
Well, then let me
prepared.
ask you now. What is your favorite Coke product?
Okay, it's not my favorite, but I appreciate the idea of it. As a part of the Coke Scholars Weekend, we went to the World of Coke, and at the World of Coke, they have every single Coke flavor that's ever been made in this kind of like room, and you get to try all of them. And there's one that tastes like straight soy sauce, and obviously I don't enjoy drinking straight soy sauce, but it was funny to watch people drink it. So I'd say that's my favorite.
Definitely.
But the interview it wasn't all too bad, honestly. I was just kind of intimidated by there being more than one interviewer. But they kind of just asked me about what I'm passionate in, what my extracurriculars have been like so far, what I plan to do in the future. It's honestly pretty low-key. And then I got the offer to be a Coke Scholar. And as a part of accepting that offer, you go down to Atlanta, Georgia for Coke Scholars Weekend. And there you get to meet the other 149 Coke Scholars from all over the United States. And that was such an amazing experience just because, like you mentioned previously, everyone has so many different interests. Everyone is so passionate. And even if, like, a Coke Scholar you met was talking about something that you had absolutely no idea about, or something that you weren't interested about in the slightest, I found myself being interested just because of how passionate they came off to be. And it's really that kind of passion that's so inspiring to me, just because like you can tell these people are going to go on to do like amazing things just because of how driven they are in like that specific field. The Coke Scholars that I met, some of the nicest people that I've ever met, some of the most passionate people that I've ever met, also insanely accomplished. You'd like ask somebody where they were going to school casually, and their default was always like, oh, I'm still deciding. And then you'd be like, oh, like where are you deciding between? Oh, just like Harvard and Stanford. I'd be like, oh, okay. I didn't know we were like that. So just insane to be able to meet all these people who are going to incredible schools, but are also extremely down to earth and just very open people, and also very open-minded people. They were all so inspiring to be around, and every single person had such a different and unique story that you could learn from. And it's really just such an enlightening experience to be able to meet these people from all over the United States, because they were all so different, but all kind of so passionate, so empathetic, and such driven people.
Definitely. They're like, the thing I like about Coke is that there are a lot of different aspects, different people from different areas interested in different stuff, but y'all are all passionate about what you do, and Coke sees that, and that's the reason why they gave you a scholarship. Definitely. But in your personal opinion, why do you believe you were a Coke Scholar? Well, why do you believe you're a Coke Scholar?
I think it probably has. I feel like the reason I was chosen is probably because of my work within ENCODE Justice. I think I really highlighted that throughout my application because it was something that I was actively working on. It was something I was very passionate about in the moment, because I was actively doing the work and I was actively championing for this bill to be introduced. So I think a lot of my passion came off just because I was actively executing this project and I was like 100% in. I feel like that probably came off within my writing. I also really tried to emphasize kind of that interdisciplinary approach that I discussed, I believe, near the beginning of this conversation, because I really think that interdisciplinary approaches and solutions are how to approach most of the problems we see in society, because I think a lot of the times people view a solution out of one lens and it is almost there, but it's just missing some other perspective. And I think I really try to kind of foster open-mindedness within myself, which is why most of my work has leaned not only towards STEM, but also humanities within the past couple of years, because I've kind of tried to create a balance there and create complementing work within the two. So I believe that's probably why, because of how I've been able to combine my STEM interests, my long-standing STEM interests with recent humanities interests of mine. But also, I think a lot of my passion came off just because I was actively doing the work and I was so beyond into it.
Definitely. Obviously with all the extracurriculars you have had, your passion for them definitely is something that would, add together to make a co-scholar, which it did. So to round out this interview, the Voice for You podcast is the main tagline is to empower the leaders of today and tomorrow. So what is some advice that you can give the audience members or myself or anybody that is trying to be a leader in their own community and achieve, stuff like you have in your own community of Indianapolis?
I think the main thing that I really try to live by is just to make sure that you are going above and beyond in every single thing that you find interesting, and to make sure that you aren't being kind of limited by other people around you, or that you aren't limiting yourself. I think a lot of the times what people need to do to truly achieve their form of self-actualization is challenge the narratives around them that are actively limiting them. I feel like specifically when society tells you that you don't belong in a field because of something so inherent to your being, it's hard to navigate that for sure, because when there's people that don't look like you think that you shouldn't belong there because there aren't people like you that are actively doing the work to the degree that would kind of constitute an equal form of representation. So I think making sure to challenge the narratives around you that say that you don't belong, actually think about kind of the long-standing forms of inequity that are present in so many systems that have made it so that people like you are excluded, but also not letting that limit you. Because yes, there's so many systemic barriers that can come in the way of diverse people achieving their form of success. That is a thing, and that is a very valid thing that so many people, including myself, are experiencing. But that shouldn't completely limit you. There are ways to kind of navigate experiencing these difficulties, especially when you are so passionate and when you are willing to put in the effort. So I feel like a lot of the times there are things that are going to get in your way, but I do think they can be overcome with that kind of passion and that effort behind what you're doing. But I think you really have to be passionate about the things you are trying to achieve, because ultimately you're the one who wants to achieve them. So it should be you who wants to put in this sort of work. And I think going back to the idea of challenging the societal narratives around you, this is inspired by her name is Nanez Baker. I believe that's how you say her name. Her commencement speech. But a quote in that, or I'm definitely paraphrasing it, but your voice will always be too loud for people who don't think you deserve one. And that was so beyond inspiring to me, because I think that's so true. A lot of the times people will try to push you down because they think that you don't belong in a certain field, or they think that you are not capable of achieving something just because you don't fit their version of success that they have in their mind. But truly, that's just something that you have to ignore, and something that you have to kind of push through. And eventually, once you're in a more position of power, you can work to dismantle these societal structures that are so against diversity and inclusion. But I'd say for right now, you truly just have to push through that with the passion and the effort. And truly, it's just you have to believe in yourself when people around you don't believe in you.
Definitely. That's a key takeaway that many people have told me, having passion in what you do, because if you're not passionate about what you're doing, then it really just feels like work. But if you do have passion, it's not work anymore. It's more doing something you love. Definitely.
Yeah, genuinely. And then another side point, I'd say just always be willing to take that extra step, and always be willing to reach out to that person who you don't think will respond. I swear cold emailing has gotten me some of the most valuable opportunities, and the opportunities that I've learned the most from. And a lot of the times people are open to and want to help students specifically. So just taking advantage of your title and just shooting that email even when you think there's a possibility that nothing will come from it. Like you mentioned previously, even if there's one response within 20 rejections, that opportunity can still lead to something huge. So just reaching out, just utilizing your network and utilizing people who truly do want to help you. And
Definitely. That's that's also another key takeaway too. You just hit two key takeaways that many people have mentioned. Networking. It takes you a lot farther than you think. Like, take this podcast, for example. If I didn't reach out to you, it's not a cold email, but it's a cold DM. Okay. If didn't do that, then we wouldn't be here today. So networking. A lot of people, they might think like, oh, they're going to think I'm weird. But, in reality, a lot of people are happy to help. They feel good from, people reaching out to them and asking for their advice or something like that. So definitely.
Yeah, truly. And I think from an opportunity, like obviously comes another one. You're a big point of conversation within the Coke Scholars group chat. So many people have said that they wanted to reach out to you to hop on the podcast just because you reached out to some other Coke Scholars that have like joined the podcast. And like every single one, like there's been so many of them who've like said that they've wanted to hop on the podcast just because like they've seen how passionate you are and they've seen like the experience that everyone else has had. So I think from one thing definitely comes another. And congratulations on the work you've been doing. Hopefully you can join our network next year.
Definitely. I'm praying. And, definitely if any of your Coke Scholar friends, a lot of people have private accounts. So I wasn't able to like reach out to them personally. But if any of them want an interview, tell them to reach out to like either the Voice for You account or, my own personal account. Definitely. I would love to have them on here and, get the information and the words of wisdom like you have just told us, But thank you so much, Asha, for, joining us on the podcast for this episode. Like I said, spreading your wisdom, your dreams, your passions, and, your life, helping me and everyone else empower the leaders of today and tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a great time.
Thank you. And to the audience, thank you so much for watching till the very end. Remember to follow the Voice for You podcast on Spotify, Instagram, and YouTube. Once again, I'm your host, Jeshwant Vana. Thank you so much, Asha, for joining us on this episode, and we will see y'all next time. Thank you so much.
Bye.